right, guys, we are so excited to have you with us today. I'm Miss Sam.
And I'm Miss Sarah.
And welcome to our Problems of Erosion Coastal Classroom lesson. We have a lot of fun stuff planned for you today, but what I want you to do first is you and your adult helper check out our website, and you can find the supply list information and the pre-test all on our website. And now Miss Sarah is going to tell you all about the fun stuff we have planned.
So a few goals for today's lesson is to first talk about erosion, which is a process that's happening here in South Louisiana and causing us to lose land. But we'll also talk about terracing, which is an example of a project that's going to help to protect and restore the land that we're losing here in South Louisiana. So I'm ready to get started. What about you, Miss Sam?
I am too. Let's jump to it. Okay, so let's go ahead, jump in, and learn some about erosion. Now, you guys may have already heard the word erosion in class and have learned about this, but we're going to do just a quick recap here. So erosion is the process by which wind or water wears away sand or sediment. Okay, so this is a process that can change an area, including shorelines, and it happens all over the world. So this isn't just something that happens here in Louisiana. But we are going to look at some ways Louisiana itself is affected by erosion. Now, Louisiana is actually losing land, believe it or not, due to processes like erosion. Now, when I say losing land, Louisiana has lost 1,800 square miles, over 1,800 square miles since 1932. That's a lot of land, and we're still losing land today. So we lose land today at a rate of about 1 football field every 90 minutes, so every hour and a half. And what that basically means is if you sit down to watch a movie, by the time your movie is over, Louisiana has lost about a football field of land. Now, this is affect some areas have higher rates of erosion and land loss than others. So we are going to jump down to Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge in southwestern Louisiana because they are experiencing high rates of erosion and it's changing their shorelines. So in this video that we are about to look at, you're actually going to be able to see the shoreline change. Now, this video starts in 1984, where the shoreline was, and goes all the way to 2017. So as you watch this video, you can see that shoreline change over these years. The shoreline moves. Now, that is because that shoreline has been eroded and had several other problems happen to it, leading to that loss of land along the shoreline. This isn't just happening at Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge. It's happening all over the state of Louisiana, all along the coast. Now, we are going to go check out a really cool activity Miss Sarah has for us to actually see erosion happening. So let's go jump to it.
So now let's do a fun experiment to show us how erosion causes us to lose land. And we'll also learn about how important plants, like the ones in our wetlands, are for helping to slow down erosion. So you will need an adult helper for this experiment, so I'll call over Miss Sam right now. And we're going to go over the supplies that you need for this experiment. Now, the supply list is on our website, like Miss Sam said earlier, so check that out if you haven't already. But you're going to need a flat pan with raised sides, like this orange one. But you can also use a plate with raised sides, whatever you have around your house. You're going to need sand, so about 1 to 2 cups of sand total, depending on the size of your pan. You're going to need a sponge. So this is going to kind of act as like our plants, our vegetation. You're going to need some water. So we have ours in a beaker, but you could also use a measuring cup if that's what you have at your house. And you'll need about 1 full cup of water. You'll also need a colander or a strainer, anything you have laying around that's like this. And we do have a few rules for today's experiment. The first is that you will need an adult helper to help you with the second part of the experiment. So that's why I called Miss Sam over, but I will let you know when it's time that you need to call over your adult helper. Another thing is that we all make a mess, and that's perfectly fine. So just keep some paper towel handy in case you make a mess with your water. All right, I'm ready to get started. So the first step is going to be to take your sand. You're going to pour out about 1 cup of sand, and you're going to make a pile of sand on one side of your pan. So this is going to be our first community. So this sand represents land. We're going to do the same thing, pour out about 1 cup of sand, and I'm going to make another pile on the other side of my pan, and this is going to be community number 2. This is going to be another area of land. Now, to one of your communities, you're going to add your sponge, and like I said, the sponge is going to act as plants, so think of this as like your wetlands. So you're going to just place your wetlands or your vegetation right over one of your communities. Now let's talk about some science words. Let's talk about a hypothesis.
So a hypothesis is an educated guess or what you think is going to happen. So whenever you start an experiment like this, you always want to make a hypothesis or what you think is going to happen. So what do you think, Miss Sarah?
So this is what I think, and you could have a completely different hypothesis. That's perfectly fine. But my hypothesis is that our pile of sand here, or our community with no plants or no wetlands, is going to have more erosion, or that land is going to wash away more than this community with the plants, with those wetlands. So we're going to go ahead and test this hypothesis.
Okay, and to test this hypothesis, we are going to do the rest of the experiment. So you're about to make it rain over these communities, okay? Because remember, erosion is when rain or water or wind wears away sediment or sand like we have here. So to make it rain, that is why you need water and why you need the strainer. So what you're going to do, this is where you need your adult helper. You or your adult helper, it doesn't matter which one does this, need to hold the strainer about 6 to 8 inches above your community. Okay? Now you're going to make it rain because as one person pours the water, the other's going to move it back and forth, making it rain. So, you guys ready to make it rain on our first community? Are you ready, Miss Sarah?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm going to pour slowly, and you only want to pour half a cup of water. And you see Miss Sarah's continually shaking it, making it rain as I pour this water. And you can already see some of that erosion happening. Okay, so look at our first community. Now keep in mind that strainer is wet, okay? So be very careful how you move it, because if you move it too much, you can make a mess. So if we look at first community, there's a lot of erosion that's taking place. Now let's check out what happens to our second community with our plants, okay? So remember, hold it just as high. You need half a cup of water again, and Miss Sarah's going to shake it, and it's going to rain. And you slowly, keep in mind, you slowly pour all the water out. Okay, so now, if we look at our second community, does it look like it eroded as much as our first? No, those plants held soil in place. So that's why plants are so important to wetlands and to coastal communities, because they help hold that soil in place and prevent things like erosion. So this is a great activity to do at home. You see that your pan is full of sand and water. This is where your adult helper is going to be able to help you clean up so it doesn't make too much of a mess. But remember, erosion is one of the ways Louisiana is losing land. So Louisiana is losing a football field of land every 90 minutes or every hour and a half. So this is kind of what we're seeing along our coast. On areas where we've lost land or lost plants, we see more erosion. Now we're going to go check out Miss Sarah, who is looking at something pretty stormy that can also lead to high rates of erosion. So let's go see what Miss Sarah's doing.
So we're going to now talk about hurricanes and tropical storms, which can cause land loss here in coastal Louisiana. But before we get into that, I'm going to go somewhere that's a little bit safer so we can talk more. So like I said, hurricanes and tropical storms can cause land loss here in Louisiana. And a big part of this is storm surge. So you may or may not have heard about storm surge, but it's basically a big wave that comes ahead of a hurricane, and it moves a lot of water and causes flooding and can also cause erosion. An example of this is the series of hurricanes that started back in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina. And these hurricanes actually caused Louisiana to lose over 300 square miles of land. Now, if you can see in this picture, a more recent example is back in 2017. So you see these three hurricanes, and the middle one is Hurricane Irma. You may remember Hurricane Irma. This was a very powerful storm that moved a lot of sand and water. So let's zoom in on Florida and the Bahamas. So the image on the top from NOAA and NASA shows us before Hurricane Irma hit. And you can see that light color, that sand, is mostly near the Bahamas. Now let's jump down to the bottom picture from NOAA and NASA. And this is after Hurricane Irma came through. And you can see that this storm moved a lot of that light colored sand to the Florida coast. So powerful hurricanes can move a lot of sand and water around, and this can cause erosion like we have here in South Louisiana. But one good thing about living here in South Louisiana is we have these amazing wetlands, and wetlands can actually act as protection for storms. Now I'm going to let Miss Sam talk to you about how important our wetlands are in helping us with storms. So let's turn things over to her.
So like as Sarah said, wetlands are extremely important in protecting our coastal communities from storms like hurricanes. These wetlands actually serve as a storm buffer or protection from storms. So when these big storms come in with waves and with wind, our wetlands can help slow this down, protecting our coastal communities. Now, as we said earlier, these wetlands are being lost as we lose land, okay? So as we lose our wetlands, we lose our storm protection. When we noticed that we're starting to lose the storm protection, we knew we had to build something to help still protect our coastal communities and help with returning some of that habitat that we've lost as we've lost wetlands. So we began designing things like terraces, which you see in this picture. Now, terracing is like a very long, narrow strip of land. Okay, so if you look in this picture, they actually piled up sediment or dirt really high, actually above the water, to serve as a terrace, and then it's planted on top. So you can see all the green on top of these terraces. So these terraces serve two main functions. So first, they help slow down waves. They actually act as a speed bump with these waves. So as waves start coming in to these areas, this water will slowly go over the terrace, and it's moving slower as it goes over to the shoreline. So our terraces are built along shorelines, and they're normally built in areas where we've lost some marsh habitat. Now, these terraces are extremely important to helping protect and restore areas of our coast, and we're about to do an activity that is going to show you how important these terraces can be. So to do this activity, you're going to need a few different things, including an adult helper. So I'm going to ask Miss Sarah to come help me. You are going to need a loaf pan, just like the one I have here, because you're going to make a wetlands in a pan model. So to do this, you're going to take your loaf pan, or you can use any smaller pan like this with raised sides. You're going to need clay, okay? You're going to need quite a bit of clay. So you're going to take some of that clay, and you're going to build land in one section of this pan. So you can see I have all of this open here. So that's like our open water. And then you're going to build land up here with your clay. Now, make sure that this shoreline area is lower than this area up here. Okay, that's right up next to the back edge of your pan. Now, once you get that, and you can pause the video so you can take your time to make your wetland in a pan model. Once you have the model done, you're going to need another handful of clay, and you are going to need about 100 milliliters of water, or you're going to need about half a cup of water. Keep in mind you can use a beaker like this, or you can use a measuring cup that you have at home. Okay, so you're going to need about half a cup of water. Now with our wetland in a pan model, what we're going to do first, as I said, with this area, we had wetlands to begin with. Okay, we're again going to use our sponge to represent our wetlands. So our wetlands are right here by our shoreline. They kind of made that border between this land here and our water. Now, As I said, we're losing land, so that means we have lost these wetlands protection. So now our pan looks like this, just like what we started with a minute ago. Now, there's no protection here as big waves and strong winds come in from here and hit our coastal communities that are going to be all the way up here. What they started doing is adding terraces like we just talked about. So Miss Sarah's going to help us by forming some terraces. So you're going to take your clay and you're going to take a little bit off of it, just like what Miss Sarah has, and you're going to roll it like you're making a snake, okay? So you're going to keep making it, and remember your terraces are long and narrow. So Miss Sarah's going to make it, and then what you can do is you want to test and see if your terrace is too big. Because remember, it's got to fit in our wetland in a pan model. Now, one thing to remember and keep in mind is a terrace is not like a levee, okay? You guys have probably heard of levees before. A terrace's job is not to keep water out. A terrace's job is to slow down some of those waves coming towards the shoreline. So we're going to take our terrace, and we see, if we look at the terrace Miss Sarah just made, it's touching both sides of the pan, so it's looking more like a wall than a terrace. So what we need to do is all you can do is you can shorten it, or you can make another one. As you're making these terraces, you want them about the width of your finger, okay? So you don't want them to be itty bitty little skinny like a string. They need to be thicker, just like what Miss Sarah has here. So now let's test this terrace out and see if it fits in our pan. And it fits perfect. Now, like you saw Miss Sarah doing there, you want to push it down just a little to keep your terrace in place, because you don't want it to wash away when you pour water in the pan in a second. So we have our terrace in place. Now, if you want, you can make more terraces, because a lot of times you don't see just one terrace. You see many different terraces and many different rows. So Miss Sarah's made a second terrace that we'll put right behind it. You notice this is going parallel to our shoreline here, and we have two terraces in place. So you guys remember what these terraces are supposed to do? So remember, our terrace's job is to slow down water coming towards the shoreline. Now remember, they also provide habitat, which is great, because in this area that didn't used to have any type of marsh because it all was lost, we now have some little marsh habitat here, some little habitat where we can have all sorts of plants and animals live. Now, we're going to add the water. You guys ready? This can make a mess, so just like any of our other activities, you want to have paper towels, and you can even have some baby wipes or something to help clean up, okay? Because your clay can make a mess. So what we're going to do now is add the water. Now, remember, you need half a cup of water, and you don't want to dump it all in. You want to pour slow and watch what that water does, okay? So it's going to make a bit of a wave at first, but you see it doesn't rush towards my community here. It moves slower towards my community, okay? Protecting my community. So these terraces are very, very important to Louisiana. And now that you guys have done this activity, you probably still have clay on your hands. So you want to be very careful and don't touch anything. In just a second, you can either use your baby wipe or you can go wash your hands. But before that, we want to thank you guys for joining us.
So we had a lot of fun with you today talking about erosion and terraces. And this is our coastal classroom lesson, the problem of erosion. Now we hope that you remember that erosion is causing us to lose land here in Louisiana, but these terraces are helping to protect and restore our land here in South Louisiana. So that's all we have for you today. We hope you had fun. Bye.
Bye. Remember to check out the other videos.
Thank you for coming to our Coastal Classroom lesson. We would like to thank the Greater New Orleans Foundation for helping make this program possible, and we hope you check out our others.